So I wanted to share today, we'll see how this lands with you guys, about the characteristics of a Zen teacher. I feel this is somewhat of an awkward conversation or Dharma talk, because I'm talking about myself and to a certain degree. And when I originally thought about this talk, I was thinking about sharing what the roles of a teacher are, because sometimes there's some confusion there. But I thought, well, first we need to start out with, well, what is a teacher? What is a teacher in Zen? Um, so I want to share some stories to start with, to kind of give us, to lay the groundwork here. And maybe even just to start, just to back up a little bit about the rareness of hearing the Dharma. In the Midwest, that's really, 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 really true, right? It's so rare to find Dharma, and so starting from that place, and so we tend to gravitate towards wherever we can find it, and to places that might be large, because they get their material out there, they're resourced, they're often in more liberal areas of the country, and well supported by a lot of people. But they're also rare. And so we want to, I think, share the Dharma in a local space. The Dharma is everywhere, yet we tend to gravitate towards those places that get their name out there. But the Dharma is absolutely everywhere. And cultivating it here in the Midwest, in Omaha, this is both rare, but I think it's the place to do it. It's not having to go on an airplane, go to some place, but creating the conditions for the Dharma to be heard right where we are. It's right here. So let's look at how difficult it is to actually share the Dharma, to hear the Dharma, to talk about the Dharma. I want to give my first example, my first encounter with the Dharma, when I heard it and when I started to do what I understood as practice it. I thought my thoughts after that were, I want to share the Dharma. I want to teach the Dharma. And I was surprised to hear a couple years after that, I was surprised when I went to my teacher's temple, Mount Equity Zendo, and she had several dignitaries at her temple staying at that time. And I was I had just graduated from college, and I had dropped out from graduate school, and I thought maybe I can make my way in the world teaching. But I was teaching elementary school at the time, and it was before I was actually living with my teacher as a student. And I went to see her because there was all these dignitaries there. Oyama Roshi was there, and I'd heard so many wonderful things about Oyama Roshi. She was the abbess of the women's monastery where my teacher trained for 8 years. And there were other Japanese priests present, and so I thought, wow, this is fantastic. I'm going to go up there. It's about a 3-hour drive from my home in Maryland, and hear what they had to say. And when I got there, I don't know how this happened, but I must have shared offhanded with my teacher that I wanted to be able to teach the Dharma. And one of the Japanese priests caught wind of that, and he said, he approached me at one point very seriously and sternly, and he said, Eric-san, don't teach. And I was kind of shocked by that statement. I thought, wow, what does he mean? And I think that was a very helpful experience for me, because in our society, we learn something, we want to teach it right away. And there's nothing wrong with that approach. But there's something to be said about not teaching immediately once you learn something. There's something to be said about that. And so it really stuck with me. And I was getting myself, actually, when I think back on it now, I was getting myself into trouble by trying to teach the Dharma too soon, before I had really ripened. We talk about the ripening of the Dharma within us. I got myself in real trouble trying to share it with people that were not ready to hear it. So if we look now into the first 7 cases of the Book of Serenity, which is a foundational Soto Zen text, this Book of Serenity, the first 7 koan cases in them, if you just look briefly at the cases and see the examples of the teachers here, how they teach, it's remarkable that most of these cases, most of these 7, are about the wordless Dharma, the Dharma that isn't taught. I'll just give you some examples here. Number 1, keep in mind in Asian literature, when it's number 1, it's usually the most important of all of the 100 that are in here. One day, the world-honored one ascended the seat in order to give a talk. Manjushri struck the gavel and said, "Clearly observe the Dharma of the King of Dharma." Observe the teachings. Right? The Dharma of the King of Dharma is thus. The world-honored one then got down from the seat. End of story. That's number 1. Now we go to number 2, Bodhidharma's emptiness. So without going into the case very deeply, we'll just give you some context here. Bodhidharma is asked to go before the emperor. He doesn't want to go before the emperor and give him teaching. And he gives him a very obscure kind of teaching to start with. And then he goes and faces a wall for 9 years. He doesn't teach at all. Right? So that's the story of Bodhidharma in China. Number 3. A Raja of an East Indian country invited the 27th Buddhist patriarch, Prajnatara, to a feast. The Raja asked him, "Why don't you read scriptures? Why don't you read scriptures?" This is a good question for us to think about, because we place such a high stock in the written word, in books. And if a book says it, it must be true, right? This is calling that to question. We have to be very vigilant about the books we read about Buddhism, about Zen, who authored them. Because it was published does not mean that it's worth our time. Not that there's not great effort that's gone into a writing of a book, but we should be careful about holding it up too high without really knowing the author somewhat. And there's other things involved there too. The patriarch said, "This poor wayfarer doesn't dwell in the realms of the body or mind when breathing in, doesn't get involved in myriad circumstances when breathing out. I always reiterate such a scripture, hundreds, thousands, millions of scrolls." Where are these sutras? He's breathing them in and breathing them out. It's not going through here, through the head. Number 4. The world honored one points to the ground. This is a wonderful one for thinking about temples and what a temple is. As the world honored one was walking with the congregation, he pointed to the ground with his finger and said, "This spot is good to build a sanctuary." Indra, emperor of the gods, took a blade of grass, stuck it in the ground, and said, "The sanctuary is built." The world honored one smiled. So our ideas of a temple need to be adjusted too. In my teacher's story, she had been in Japan for a number of years and was only accustomed to seeing beautiful old Buddhist temples. And she was on an 88 temple pilgrimage. This was before she found her ordination teacher. And she was going from temple to temple on a 6-week pilgrimage, walking. And she saw these, one after the other, temple after temple, that were 1,000+ years old. And almost towards the end of her pilgrimage, she saw a sign that said, "Zen Dojo that way." She followed the sign to it. She got off the path of the 88 temple pilgrimage. And what did she find as the temple? A bus. She looked into it and saw the seats had been soldered out of it, the zafus were up top, and an altar was in the back of the bus. And it dawned on her, oh, you don't need a fancy temple to practice, you just need a pure heart. Right? That's the temple, is the pure heart. The pure heart is the temple, not the place. So be careful about where you assign Dharma to. We want to say it's got to be a great place. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't visit great temples and great places. But what I am saying is be careful of where you assign the importance to. Right? The Dharma is right here. The nirvana is right here, right now. Can we see it? It's up to us. That's where the practice comes in. It's not easy. It's not easy to perceive that, but that's where we want to go. We want to go where it's not easy, not where it's easy. That's another mark of a teacher. Go to the places that are uncomfortable and be there and smile. That's a good quality to cultivate. Not easy. Number 5. The price of rice. This one's a little bit more obscure. I'm going to move on. But that's only one. Mazu's white and black. Another one. But the 7th one is similar to the first one. Yao Shan ascends the seat. Yao Shan hadn't ascended the seat to give a Dharma talk for a long time. The temple superintendent said to him, "Everybody's been wanting instruction for a long time. Please, Master, expound the teaching for the congregation." He hasn't been giving any quote unquote Dharma talks. Yao Shan had him ring the bell, so he's going to oblige him. Ringing the bell means it's time for a Dharma talk. When the congregation had gathered, Yao Shan ascended the seat. Okay, he ascends the seat. We don't really do that here. I'm sitting on the same seat as everybody else. We're on the same level. But keep in mind, in Asian countries, as well as here in the United States too, in Buddhist temples, generally speaking, there's a platform where the teacher speaks from. You're giving highlight to the teacher. My teacher did that. Actually, we had a platform for her to sit on. It wasn't, it was just half a foot off of the ground, and that she would sit on that. It's not for the teacher. It's not to pump up their ego. It's for all of us. It's to highlight, the Dharma is being given, because we take it for granted. But remember, we're in the Midwest. We don't have lots of places to hear the Dharma. And I think we feel that too. How many places, how many churches are there compared to Buddhist temples here? It's a pretty big difference. And I have nothing against churches. It's just saying it's a rare thing to hear Dharma. And that's not to say Dharma isn't expounded in churches either, in its own form. When the congregation had gathered, Yaoshan ascended the seat. After a while, we don't know how long, it just says after a while, he got right back down from the seat and returned to his room. Didn't say anything. The superintendent followed after him and asked, "A while ago, you agreed to expound the teaching for the congregation. Why didn't you utter a single word?" Yaoshan said, listen carefully here, because he's about to utter a single word. "For scriptures, there are teachers of scriptures. For the treatises, there are teachers of treatises. How can you question this old monk?" How can you question this old monk? Now we've got to be careful here, because we look at this through our own Western lens. When we hear the word old monk, we might not see it with the same sense of gravity that an Asian might view that when we hear the word old monk. When we hear old, what comes to my mind is somebody in a nursing home, and they're weak. They're not able to take care of themselves. They're dependent. But in this and that's another whole different something. But in this context, old monk means a venerable being, and he has the highest respect for himself. How can you question this old? I am an old monk. Do you understand? There is some. I've given you the Dharma. You didn't get it. Right? So an old monk is to be revered. Those are the first 7 stories, and so 5 out of 7. 5 out of 7. We're getting this very, where is the Dharma? So my own teacher, her story was that it's maybe too much to share in a short time, but I'll give you a short synapse of it. She was studying with a Rinzai teacher for 3 years as a lay person, Omori Sogen Roshi in Tokyo. And what drew her to the Dharma, from my understanding of what she shared, was deep suffering. The Buddha, even the Buddha was reluctant. Remember, the Buddha was reluctant to teach the Dharma when he was first awakened. Remember that story? He attains enlightenment, and then he's very reluctant to share anything about the Dharma. He felt like it wouldn't be understood. But the first thing he teaches is that the first noble truth, that there is suffering. And so he found a way to relate to each one of us. He recognized that every being, human and otherwise, undergoes suffering. And this is the reason for him offering the Dharma. And so in my own teacher's case, she was suffering. She had suffered she wasn't able to complete her college because her father went bankrupt. She got into a marriage that failed within the first 6 years. She had been a professional ballet dancer, and her career was drying up by her mid-30s. She no longer could dance as well as the younger classical ballet dancers. She found herself in a space where she thought she was going to remarry a Japanese man, and that fell through. This kind of suffering drove her to practice, and she said she burned up a lot of her crud sitting on the cushion in the Rinzai temple. she wanted to ordain with Omori Sogen Roshi. She didn't know any distinctions between Rinzai and Soto at that time, and she just knew Zen, like most of us probably as well. We just hear that word Zen and we don't distinguish between these two different schools. And I don't want to make a big deal out of the distinction between the two. But she didn't know that at the time, but she wanted to ordain with him, and he said, I can't ordain you because I just had a series of strokes. He wasn't up to training her. He wasn't up to training a woman amidst all of his male students. And he said that the only women's monastery, Rinzai Women's Monastery, that he was aware of, had just closed because they didn't have enough women in it. So he told her, go on the 88 Temple pilgrimage, and there you'll find your answers to what you should do. Because she was faced with having to go back to the United States after having already lived in Japan for over a decade, over 12 years. She had been living in Japan, and now her visas she had to continue to revise them, update them. They were becoming more and more reluctant to do that. So she was at a pressure point. Do I go home? Do I teach classical ballet? Is there another reason for me to be here in Japan? She had lost face with her family by having divorced a very wealthy businessman, and now she come back from being abroad, plopping down. What could she offer at that point? I don't think she probably felt she couldn't offer very much, but maybe ballet dancing, unless she found another reason for being there. So he tells her, no, you can't, I'm not going to ordain you. You don't even know the Heart Sutra. Go as a pilgrim on the 88 Temple pilgrimage. And so that's what she did, and she did it very, very reluctantly at the start. And partway through it, there was this fog that she was in, and she couldn't see more than a couple of feet in front of her and a couple of feet behind her, and she had this insight. She said to herself, you idiot. All this time I'd been thinking there's going to be National Geographic reporters following me, this white foreigner woman going on this 88 Temple pilgrimage like I'm this big thing. It's not about that at all. It's not about being something. Because remember, being a non-Japanese in Japan, you stick out like a sore thumb. She was a classical ballet dancer. She had some bit of fame in that regard. And being a non-Japanese with long blonde hair, she was getting a lot of influence from the Japanese culture itself. Oh wow, look at you, look at you. And have any of you who have been, how many of you have been to Japan? Just Sean and tell me your name again. Perry, thank you.
Born and raised there.
Oh, okay. All right, so maybe you can relate to this more than me, but I know when I was there, like the Japanese, they want to take a photo of you not because you've done something, but because you're not Japanese. You think, oh, what did I do? I don't know, Perry, if you've experienced that kind of thing in Japan.
Keeping blonde-haired children with you when you're on a Japanese train is a feat in and of itself.
See, okay, I say no more.
Because they used to pass us down through the train cars, and my dad was like, and fortunately he was fluent in Japanese, so he was able to relate very specifically, can I have my children back?
Yeah, and my wife's sister had an experience in Japan too, where people just wanted to take their photo with her in Disneyland. Go to Disneyland and take a photo with the very tall white woman with long blonde hair. It was just a thing. So she was getting the seeds of fame watered in her, and was realizing in the midst of this fog, oh, I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I bought into all these ideas, this idea of fame. So that settled her mind quite a bit. It wasn't about being famous. No National Geographic cameras behind watching this fame, nothing like that. And her whole practice ended up revolving around being very watchful and vigilant of fame and gain. what's called fame and gain. So she finds her teacher. He's got this white bus. That's where the Zendo is, and has a conversation with him over a 3-day period. She stays with him for a while, and over a 3-day period, and then has the courage to ask him, would I be able to practice with you? He says, no. Why not? Because you're a foreigner and you're a woman. That's what he says. It might be really offensive to some people to hear that. But what does that mean? It means, well, if you're staying with me on this mountain, what do you think people are going to think? You know, they're going to think we're in a relationship, and we can't do that. I'm a priest. You'd have to ordain if you wanted to practice with me. Oh, okay. Okay, well, that's kind of what I was after anyway. She didn't say that to him. But what do I have to do that? Okay, do Zazen for 10 years. Don't give a Dharma talk for 10 years. And live on alms for 10 years. Not exactly in those words, but don't give a talk, he said, for 10 years. Because why? Your understanding won't be ripe. That's a common thing in Soto Zen, to ripen your understanding of the Dharma. So don't give a talk. You're going to have, and he was aware of how Japanese treated foreigners. He said if they see you dressed up as a priest, the news are going to hound you for, tell us about you and this foreign woman, and it said that's going to ruin your practice. You've got to really steepen the Dharma. So why for this? So that's kind of a hint at why we have to be careful about sharing the Dharma. And this is not to say that if we haven't been silent for 10 years about this, that we shouldn't say a thing about it. I don't want to give that message either. That's not it either, because there can be value in sharing the Dharma, but we just have to do it when it's appropriate. I want to share the Dharma so bad, and for so many people it's not going to work. I can't just share it. I'm so grateful I can share this Dharma with you all. And that's why when we say this, the Dharma is rarely met with in 100,000 million kalpas. That's true. I really feel the truth of that more and more. I mean, when was the last time we got to hear the Dharma spoken? So I take this role quite heavily. But what we want to be cautious of, especially in the United States here, is our motives for offering or teaching the Dharma. What are our motives? And the biggest one, I think, that Dogen is very critical of, and it's something for us to also be watchful for in our culture and time, is what he called fame and gain. So I want to put these two characters up here on the board for you all to see. So the first one, okay, this one is this is the moon, and a mouth. It literally means name. When the moon illuminates the darkness, the crescent moon illuminates the darkness, you say your name. So in other words, you're distinguishing yourself from others. You're making a distinction of yourself from others. And that also gets translated as fame. Think about fame. Somebody who's famous is very distinguished from others. They're somehow pulled out and highlighted as above and beyond us. You can think about famous rock stars. Think about famous actors. Famous teachers too. And The practice, though, especially in Japan, is the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. They're really good at being able to subdue the ego and work as a group. And to be fair, that has its negative sides. I don't want to explicate on those. But for Americans who say the opposite, stand up and be counted, this is a good counterbalance to our culture, I think, to learn how to blend in. Right? It's the opposite of fame, to learn how to blend in. Actually, that's why you can't tell here because there's just Shinkyu and I, but in a monastery where there's training monks, like Shinkyu's experience, like myself, nobody sticks out because we're all wearing the same clothing, we're all shaved heads, and that's on purpose. That's to make us indistinguishable, so that one person is not seen as better. That helps to cultivate this caution around fame. And the other one is gain. So this part here, this has to do with a grain, and the part on the right is a knife, and so it has to do with gain. It has to do with gaining. So you think about somebody reaping a harvest, right? Rice was money in olden time Japan. But there's the sense from looking at the character of emphasis on the fruit of one's action. The emphasis on what are the results going to be if I do such and such. And that's a common motivation for a lot of us. Like, if I do this, then I'm going to get that. Gain. I'm going to gain something. If I do this, then I get that. And that's also contradictory to our Zen practice. We do it ideally without gain, but actually what we're doing is recognizing how we desire something from it and working towards letting it go. Recognizing that we desire to gain, we desire fame on some level, right? So this is, I'm just showing a mirror for our minds and noticing how fame and gain show up in our minds, how it motivates us to practice. It's very hard, again, to talk about our practice with others because they'll ask, well, why do you do that? And you can't say, well, I don't do it for any reason at all because that doesn't make sense. We're kind of in a conundrum here. And I just want to point that out. It's not your fault. It's the way that practice enlightenment works. It's not about the results, but people are going to look for them. And they're going to look for them in you. My teacher said when I first started practicing with her, she said, other people might notice changes in you before you notice them in yourself. So in other words, don't look for them in yourself. Don't worry about change happening and gaining something from the practice for yourself. If the practice is grounded, then other people will notice it. And that's, but don't look for other people to say, hey, you've changed in a positive way. Don't wait for that either, right? But just be cautious. So Dogen was very critical of fame and gain. And my teacher said so after 8 years of training in the women's monastery, she was invited to do this 4 years of training called the Shike training with all monks, all men, priests. And they practiced together for 2 years at Koshoji, which was Dogen's first temple that he founded when he came back from China, and then 2 years at Hokyoji, which is very close to Eiheiji. It was founded by Jakuan Zenji, a Chinese monk who followed Dogen back to Japan after he left. And but anyways, at Koshoji, the story goes that in the time of Dogen, there was a monk that received a large donation, and he expressed some degree of glee and delight in the fact that he had brought some big donation. And not only did Dogen, I don't know if this is true or not, probably have to verify. I don't know if it's just Soto Zen folklore, but apparently Dogen not only kicked him out of the monastery, but dug out the earth from under his seat where he, his tatami mat seat where he sat, 6 feet. and she was told whenever they passed by that particular monk's seat to step beyond it, as a reminder of that mind of gain. So it's taken very seriously in the traditional practice, fame and gain, and it's something for us, I think, to really take to heart for our own practice, and to really, really settle into this lifestyle, whether you're a priest or not, to settle into it. Right, because those fame and gain are they will undo us. They're the hindrances that we need to pay particular attention to. So now I want to share about what Dogen says more clearly about in his Gakudo Yojinshu, guidelines for practicing the way. And this is not part of his Shobo Genzo, it's an independent text, but he writes these 10 guidelines for studying the way, the Tao, the Buddha way. And I don't want to go through all 10 of them, they're all worthy of going through, and I may be doing this a disservice by just focusing on one of them. It's number 5. It's right in the middle. He says, you should seek a true teacher to practice Zen and study the way. So that's the 5th one, is to practice with a teacher. So here's the qualities of a teacher, someone that's not focused on fame nor gain. That's one of the ways we can identify a teacher. And it's a good reminder for me too. Oh, I got to be careful here. Am I doing this practice for fame and gain? There's certainly a side of me that wants that. But okay, now that I recognize it, let it go. Then I can let it go more easily. You should seek a teacher, and that's what also attracted me to my teacher, was that she wasn't concerned at all. I mean, she had almost no traces of that. There was many times when I thought, you could do this, you could do that, you need to get out there, and she was just unmoved by it. And certainly as a woman who, shaved her head, which is very hard to do, I think, for women. It's easier, I think, for men to shave their heads. It's more commonplace. But for a woman to do it, especially someone in her generation, she's now in her 80s, to do that is it's a much more profound thing. People, you get the cancer look. Are you doing chemo? I'm sorry. Or if you're not, what did you do that for? Are you crazy? It's associated with your beauty, etc. So it was a profound experience to be with her and to witness how she was, the various looks that she had got, and just how people perceived somebody like her. That was good for me to witness that. And she wasn't concerned with she wanted to write things, but she never really did. And the only time she really, she would write things for newsletters and stuff, and she wrote a couple of chapters for a couple of different books. But the one book she translated, Zen Seeds, was done because her teacher, Oyama Roshi, wanted her to translate her book, Oyama Roshi's book, into English, and gave her lots of space and time to do it. And without those conditions, she wasn't able to write anything, and she wasn't motivated. Well, she was somewhat motivated, but not really. No, I shouldn't say not really. I think maybe she was motivated, but it just didn't happen. In any case, a teacher of old said, "If the beginning is not right, myriad practices will be useless." The beginning, Dogen is associating with, is having a teacher. That's the beginning of practice in Soto Zen, is having a teacher. And that might come across strange to Westerners, to this audience especially, because most of us nowadays can find what we call Dharma not through an actual person. We might find it through the words of a person. We might find it through books. We might find it through the internet, through websites. I'm not saying that's bad or wrong. It's just the way things have kind of sprawled out here as the Dharma is shared. But it's worth thinking about this point, is that the start of practice, for Dogen, the start of practice is having a true teacher. That's the start. And so there's something worth paying attention to here. Very hard to do. It's very hard to find a teacher. And even with the internet, it's very hard to find a teacher. But the Lotus Sutra, it says that a student is born from the mouth of the teacher. That's the Lotus. The student is born from the mouth of the teacher. I consider myself very, very lucky to have found not just my own Zen teacher, but many teachers that were good. And it's always been the relationship I've had with another human being that has been transformative in some way for me to help set me straight. More so, there's some distance when we're reading the words of somebody. And so Soto Zen practice, we're reading the words of Dogen here, but keep in mind the ceremonies that we do are meant to get us in touch with the living ancestors of the tradition. Even with Nonin, with Katagiri Roshi, with Tomoe Katagiri, who just recently passed away, we do these rituals to get in contact with them. And if we do the rituals with the right frame of mind, we can feel their presence there. And they may even impart some insight to us. So Dogen goes on about this and kind of praising these words. The disciple, he says, is like wood, and the teacher resembles a craftsman. Even if the wood is good, without a skilled craftsman, its extraordinary beauty is not revealed. Even if wood is bent, placed in skilled hands, its splendid merits immediately appear. Wow, that's a good teacher. Somebody who can create somebody, or not create somebody, but to bring out the best in somebody, whether they're already quite well polished or they have a lot of problems and difficulties. And so that's a skilled teacher. So a teacher who challenges us to be our very best. That's what a teacher does. And I remember my teacher all the time. I didn't appreciate it very much. I appreciate it more now, but at the time going through living with her, I'll just give you one small example, and I don't recommend this for anybody in particular, but just what she saw in me. When she first taught me how to do Zazen, she didn't teach me how to do like a lotus posture or anything like that. But after I'd been living with her for close to a year, she looked at my posture and she said, "Daishin, have you been doing Burmese style for all this time?" Granted, I was in my early 20s, and I was embarrassed. I said, "Yeah, was that wrong?" She said, "You should be doing full lotus." And I looked at her like, and she said, "Well, at least half lotus." Yeah, but it was helpful. It was helpful words, because then I went home that summer and I started working on my posture more. I thought, okay. If she believes that I can do this, then I'll trust her. I couldn't trust me to do it. Nobody had told me that. And so then I started working on that in earnest. And then I realized, oh, this is more difficult than I thought. If we're too comfortable in the Zazen posture, it makes us a little bit, what's the word? Complacent. We have to be careful of complacency in Zazen, but in our life in general too. Right? Dogen says, we were reading yesterday, Dogen saying, don't yearn after death. Right? There's so many people who just want to give up. They don't want the hardship anymore. They don't want to deal with the suffering. And we need to hear from a teacher, don't yearn for death. Right? Suicide is very high. And even just, if not suicide, then the thought of it is very high in many people. Losing sight of what's important. Why am I here? Is there something worth living for? These are really serious questions for a lot of us, and especially younger people, but middle-aged as well. If you get to 50 or 60, you're okay. I think that maybe not. I mean, but even older people I've seen in behavioral health in their 80s, and they're really struggling. What am I doing here now? So the teachers, the job of the teacher is to really bring out the best in the student, to have us strive appropriately for our body and mind. And Dogen is very critical of words. He talks about, here he says, in our country from ancient times, various teachers have written books. He's very critical here about people who have generally just written books, and just because they do the same thing. They do the same thing that we do. They see a book and they see it as an authority. And Dogen is picking this up 1,000 years ago, and he's saying, look, in our country, 1200s that is, in ancient times, so Buddhism had been there for about 500 years prior to Dogen, various teachers have written books and instructed their disciples, offering their teaching to human and heavenly beings. Their words are immature. Their discourse has not yet ripened. Wow. Whew. So here's this idea of it, that we have to ripen. We've got to ripen. The Dharma needs to ripen us. They have not yet reached the peak of study. So that's another point. It's like, study more deeply before you attempt to share. Or if you're going to share, just come at it with this understanding that maybe I don't have the full picture here. I've not reached the peak of study. How could they have come close to the state of realization? They only transmitted words or phrases, or taught or the chanting of Buddha's name. Now, I say that, and we chant the Buddha's name all the time, and it's a good practice. Remember, also for context, Dogen was the one who brought the depth of a monastic practice to Soto Zen. Keizan, 3 generations later, he was able to popularize the practice, and he introduces what our liturgy is for today. So it's not that chant. We got to be careful when we read Dogen. He says don't chant. Well, we're chanting all the time in Soto Zen practice. So take that with a grain of salt, because the practice needs to be balanced. It's not enough just to sit in silence. We need to verbalize too. They count other people's treasure day and night, not having half a penny to themselves. In other words, they're envious. There's envy in those people. So these, again, just some qualities to be careful, to be watchful of, right? To not give in to envy. Though you give good medicine, if you do not teach a method of controlling its use, it will make one sicker than taking poison. So that's another point here. We have to be careful with the Dharma. It may be medicine for us at some of the times, but it can turn to poison if it's not done well. My teacher was really critical of people if they'd come in to the Zendo and they just plop themselves down and sit facing the wall. And meanwhile, there was all these other things that needed to get done. And she said, they're just, she would get critical, she would yell, get out of here, what are you doing sitting there? You got to move around, there's things, there's people coming, we've got floors to clean, we've got dinner to prep, and you're just sitting here. So we have to be careful, especially just reading books about the Dharma, we get some fossilized ideas about what the Dharma is. And, Jisho told a story a few months ago, she was sharing about the Dharma, and then somebody else came in, well, I read all of the Pali Sutras, and it says something different from what you're saying. Oh, okay, so now you're the authority. Okay, so that's where that can go. We get these fossilized ideas that are not relational. They're based on our intellectual understanding of the Dharma, not on a relationship with a person. And that's not to say that the person or that's playing the role of the teacher is infallible. I don't want to suggest that at all. They're just as fallible as we are. But the prominence is the relational element, which is tricky for a lot of us because let's be honest, there's a lot of religious trauma. There's trauma that goes along with trusting somebody who is propped up as an authority, a religious authority. And so we're cautious, rightly so, to engage in that kind of a relationship. But I do want to edge us towards it, and edge you all towards that kind of a connection. Not without letting down your guards because of previous experiences, bad experiences, but don't give up on it either. All right. There's something to be found there. Okay, almost done. Maybe I'll close here. The last paragraph, Dogen Zenji, he says, regardless of his age or experience, regardless of his age, so it doesn't have to be somebody old, or experience, doesn't have to be somebody who's very experienced. A true teacher is simply one who has apprehended the true teaching and attained the authentic teacher's seal of realization. She does not put text first or understanding first, but her or his capacity is outside any framework, and his spirit freely penetrates the nodes in bamboo. Not concerned with self-views, not stagnant in emotional feelings. Thus, practice and understanding are in mutual accord. This is a true master. This is kind of heavy stuff, and I want to close a little bit lighter. I remember I was with my teacher, and she had the opportunity to go to a Thich Nhat Hanh retreat. I think it was New York or somewhere like that, and she brought with her another student, and she had me stay at the Zendo in Mount Equity. Do you think I was happy about that? Here we were, she was talking about Thich Nhat Hanh left and right, and how much she had, we studied his books, and now she got she was going to go to a retreat to be with him, and she wasn't going to take me there. I had to stay back. And I was just grumbling like that whole weekend. I was thinking, oh man, I want to be with, and I got to do this, and I was really upset and angry. And she gets back from the retreat, and she's all beaming and bright and stuff. And she says, Thich Nhat Hanh asked the question of the practitioners there. You want to know what a teacher is, who a teacher is? And so I was like, tell me, I gotta know, because I'm so angry and upset and miserable right now. What is a teacher? A teacher is somebody who is happy. I started smiling right away. That's what I want, that's what I wanted. So, lifting up the practice too. We got the heavy side. Dogen gives us the heavy side, and he gives us the light side. If we dig deep enough, we'll find the light too. But keep inside the lightness too. We can all be teachers. Anytime we express, not just verbally, but with our body, contentment, happiness. If you can bring joy to your families, that's the most important thing. Bring joy to your families, bring joy into your workplace, the people that you're working with. You don't have to say any, what my teacher would say, without any B or Z words. Don't even talk about the Dharma. Bring joy, bring contentment. People will see something there. And, or maybe they won't, but that's not our concern. It's rare. It's rare to encounter the Dharma. So know that how rare this is, this event is. Thank you.